Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode of eDiscovery After Hours. My guest this week is Chris Chapman from Dickinson, Wright. We are going to learn what in the world is a father's favorite chair and how did he come to know what it is? How did he meet Terry Bradshaw? And how is his firm thinking about things like mobile device collection and generative AI? Sponsor this week is Proteus Discovery Group. Proteus is a litigator-led, financially independent e-discovery services company focused on data collection, doc review, and hosting in Relativity One, Everlaw, and Reveal. Check out proteusdiscovery.com. Thanks for tuning in.
Quick time!
You don't know how to drink, your whole generation.
Drinks on the house.
Yes, sir.
No, wait a second. Drinks are 50% off.
Right.
No, wait a second. Double the price of everything.
And I work only 16 hours a day.
A union man only works 8 hours a day.
I belong to 2 unions.
And now, eDiscovery After Hours with your host, Ryan Short.
Chris, cheers. Welcome to eDiscovery After Hours.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Your lighting must be better than mine. Your drink looks far more appetizing. It's a better color. So my frozen, what are those things called? Like the rocks that you freeze?
Oh yeah. The whiskey rocks.
Yeah, that doesn't help. I guess that doesn't help the coloration with my poor lighting. So what are we drinking, Chris? What is this?
So this is a cocktail called My Father's Favorite Chair.
Okay.
And I became aware of it. I've always been a whiskey guy. I'm into whiskey drinks generally. And I used to travel to Detroit a ton for e-discovery work back in the day. And the hotel I stayed at had a very nice bar, and the bartender was very creative with his cocktails. And I told him kind of what my wheelhouse was, and he came up with this drink. And I haven't had it in a few years. This episode inspired me to go back to it and check it out. So I appreciate you reaching out about that.
Well, I like the Detroit roots. I didn't know that. That's I was born in Detroit in Midtown. And we're there a fair bit as well for client work. Can I ask which hotel you stay at, or do you like the anonymity? You want to keep that under wraps?
Well, at the time it was the Westin Book Cadillac.
Okay. Have you stayed at the Foundation Hotel downtown?
I have not. I stayed at a newer like boutique hotel that had art in the name that was very, very cool last year, but I have not stayed at the Foundation.
All right, there you go. You are we'll come back to the life story. Let's start with a little lightning round to grease the skids. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. What's the first concert you ever attended?
First concert I ever attended, do you want me to go voluntarily attended?
Sure, you can have two answers.
All right. So the first concert I voluntarily attended was a Kiss concert, and it was the first tour with no makeup. So it would have been like 83, 84.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never looked back. Concerts are a big thing for me. So I've been to many since.
Excellent. What's the last concert that you attended?
The last concert I attended was the Black Keys in Chicago about a month ago.
Yeah, excellent. I found when I lived in Chicago, it was because I grew up in small town Indiana. I found Chicago to be almost overwhelming because there are so many world-class venues, and there is you could see a great show in multiple great shows every week year round. So it started off as like, this is amazing. And then very quickly I was like, I've got to dial it back or I will be incredibly poor if I don't exercise some discipline.
Yeah, when I moved to Chicago, that was one of the draws was living in the city and being able to go see whoever I want, several times a year. So
yeah, it's a great music town. All right. Favorite place you've ever vacationed?
Favorite place I've ever vacationed would have to be Argentina.
Hmm.
My wife and I think it was either our first or second anniversary for sure. We went down to Argentina and hit Buenos Aires, Mendoza wine country, and Patagonia. We were there
Oh,
about 10 or 12 days, and it was a blast.
that's a bucket list, man. Now, if you were taking a 10 or 12-day vacation, this is probably before your e-discovery days.
It was actually early in my e-discovery days,
Okay.
but
All right.
I wasn't on the vendor side yet, so I had a little more time. So
Yeah. All right. There you go. All right. Most famous celebrity you've ever met?
I would have to say uh, Terry Bradshaw.
Oh, that's a good answer. What's the story there?
He and my stepfather were both speaking at a union event. They were the two speakers, and so we hung out with Terry like a whole weekend when I was, probably 12, 13 years old.
Dude, I mean, if you're like that as a kid, that's just gotta be you're on cloud nine.
Yeah, it was incredible. I was a huge, football fan. Unfortunately, I was a Cowboys fan, so Terry Bradshaw was not my favorite player by far. But it was very cool to meet him.
All right, these last two questions kind of pivot us quasi into the e-discovery space. What is the most used app on your phone?
The most used app on my phone would definitely be Outlook.
Oh,
Because
that's a sad answer, Chris. You
it is
can
a
do better
very
than that.
sad answer. The one I use the most for fun would probably have to be I don't want to say Chrome because that's ridiculous, but there's a site called texags.com.
Okay.
I went to Texas A&M University, and it's a very very large community of Texas A&M sports fans meeting with one another about solving all of our problems. So
There's many problems to solve. There could be a lot of my father's favorite chairs imbibed scrolling through those football message boards.
exactly.
All right, finally, last question, lightning round. Is it GIF or GIF?
I say GIF.
Yeah,
I don't know if
that's
that's
correct.
correct, but that's what I say.
That is the correct answer, only because I also say that. So, yeah, that's sufficient for me.
I think
All right,
that's
so
perfect.
you alluded to it a little bit. You grew up a Cowboys fan. You went to Texas A&M. So, where's home? Where were you born and raised?
I was born in Garland, Texas, which is in the Dallas area.
Mm-hmm.
Lived there till I was about 10, then moved to Austin. Did a brief stint in the Atlanta, Georgia area, and then moved back to Texas after high school.
You're a Texas boy through and through. What set you on the path toward law school? Was that something that you determined very early on? I mean, are there attorneys in your family? What were you a Perry Mason fan? What was it that set you on that path?
Uh, my family was actually pretty involved in politics growing up. My dad was a lobbyist,
Mhm.
and so we knew a lot of lawyers. He was not a lawyer, but it was interesting to me to go down that path. And I was one of those that felt like law school was, something that would give me flexibility to do a lot of different things. Initially, when I got into practice, it seemed like, no, it didn't give me any flexibility. Now I'm just doing this. But
Yeah.
then I eventually found e-discovery, which, was a slightly different path, and not the same old that I envisioned when I first went to law school. So it worked out. But
Yeah. So what was your path then from, because you mentioned, right, you started in private practice. So what is it that you were doing and what was that transition into the discovery space?
So interestingly, I started in the discovery space, helping
Okay.
helping to manage. This was paper discovery, managing
Mm.
a warehouse full of documents for crash worthiness cases at a plaintiff firm.
Mm.
So we're heavily involved in rollover litigation and tire litigation, things like that. And I was managing a lot of the paper information that they relied on in preparation for these cases. And that was pre-law school. I was doing that while I was in college, and then I went to law school and then went back to the plaintiff's firm to practice for a few years before I moved into litigation, like full on litigation where I was practicing. So
Yeah. And how long did you do that for?
I practiced for about 10 years, and then I went back to school in the DC area with an eye towards teaching. I'd been teaching in various junior college and college programs uh, when I was practicing, and decided that I wanted to do that full time. Moved to DC to get into that and to go to school with that being my goal, and started working in document reviews to make ends meet while I was in school there, and never looked back. I never ended up teaching anything other than the occasional e-discovery webinar, and I've been doing that ever since. That was about 2007. So
Yeah, don't sell yourself short here. Highly sought after industry speaker, never taught anything. Come on now. Look at this humility. So, Chris, you have been both on the, you have been a commercial litigator. You have been an e-discovery vendor. You're now at a law firm in a lit support role. So you've seen obviously multiple sides of the industry. One of the things that I'm a bit of a contrarian by nature. And so one of the things that tends to irritate me is when people get real dogmatic about the righteousness of their position. And so I get frustrated when vendors complain about law firm clients because, sure, for all their faults and flaws, human beings act the way they're incented to act, right? And there's certain things that are just endemic in how law is practiced in this country, and those things won't be changed, right? No amount of education is going to change that. Consequently, or conversely, I suppose, you'll have litigators who don't understand the vendor side, right? You don't just press a button and the production magically appears. There's these things called the laws of physics that constrain, right, what some of these software programs can do. So talk to me about, as you've grown in your career, what are some of the kind of maybe misconceptions or stereotypes that you've been able to either break down or gain new appreciation for as you've gone from, practice to the vendor side to being at a, at a mid law kind of, fairly large law firm at this point?
yeah, I think having practiced myself, a big challenge that we usually face is trying to get buy-in from litigators on the use of technology, on the use of different processes than they potentially are used to. And this was whether I was working as a vendor or as a support person in a firm. And having a litigation background has helped me to kind of bridge that gap and translate a little bit with to the litigators, like, what does this mean? What does it get you? What's how does it impact your objectives? Because I'm familiar with what it is they're wanting to do and how the process works from their point of view, and I try to approach everything from that perspective, and understanding kind of where they're coming from, and that enables me to kind of couch things in a way that they're going to be more comfortable with.
What about now that you're on the firm side and you're managing the vendors? How does that play being in a law firm going out the other direction?
Yeah, sorry for the long dramatic pause. We don't work a ton with vendors. We do most things in-house. Usually when we do work with a vendor, I try to be pretty hands-off. I'm generally working with people I know and trust, and they're doing something that we can't do. So even though I might understand, how it's supposed to work and can spot issues if there are any, I try to generally give them the benefit of the doubt and be a little bit hands-off in terms of how it's going to get done, because there's a reason we went to them in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. What is something, as we record this Doug Austin's State of the Industry report came out today. And so I've, obviously we've had clients that have asked, and we kind of the shiny object, if you will, is generative AI, right? And what is it going to do? And we could talk about that. I think another thing that it's been a topic of conversation for a couple of years, but I still don't think that we, of an industry, have cracked the nut, so to speak, is mobile device discovery, specifically processing and producing, right? What are the things that you think maybe, like, what's the drum that you're banging internally? What are the things that you think aren't necessarily getting enough airtime, or they're not being dealt with appropriately today?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with mobile device discovery. I would say that's one of our biggest challenges from case to case. Everybody's using devices. They're using them in different ways. They're using different applications and different ways to communicate on those devices. And there's not a great way to manage all of that from a discovery perspective in one particular product or one particular process. It kind of has to be, customized to every situation. You got to look and see, what do you have? Where's this data sit? How are they using it? And, how is it archived? Where is it stored? And what are we going to do? And then once we get our hands on it, what format is it in? Is it something we can use in our review platform, or do we have to get another product to convert it to something we can use? It's always a multiple step process. And I would say that's the biggest challenge we still face, despite all the, hoopla around generative AI. If it can solve that problem for me, then I'd probably be ready to jump in and talk about it more. But it's not something that we're contemplating using on a day-to-day basis yet in our work.
No, well, the hype curve, right, where they talk about there's some innovation trigger that causes a new technology or a new process to be developed. And then as the market gains awareness of it, excitement builds, and then you hit this like peak of euphoria. And then shortly thereafter, you get into the valley of despair, right? And then you come out on the other side, and it's like, okay, we've hit the plateau. We understand what things do and don't do. Well, I gave a presentation on a litigation lunch the other day, and I showed the Gartner hype curve, and generative AI was right up there at the top. And, they wanted us to speak specifically to that, what's going to happen, how it'll be applied, blah, blah, blah. And I said, guys, essentially, and guys and gals, I said, essentially what this slide means is that 6 months from now, everybody's going to be furious with generative AI, because it invariably won't live up to the hype and the expectations. That said, so you just, this is a good time to be a Luddite lawyer, right? Got a couple of laughs there. All right, we'll wrap it up here a little bit. But Chris, you've been in the space for a long time. You're a fairly well-known name. What are the resources that you would recommend to the younger folks who are stepping into the industry now, or to litigators who are looking to learn a little bit more about this crazy thing called e-discovery? Is there a group that you're a part of, or a publication you find particularly gratifying? What would you point people towards?
Yeah, I try to be active in as many groups as possible, and I, in the past, I've been very involved with ACEDs, both nationally and in the Chicago groups, and that's been very valuable. And I would say since COVID, the onset of free online learning opportunities in e-discovery has exploded, and it's been phenomenal to be able to watch the UF e-discovery conference, or Relativity Fest, or just weekly webinars put on by various vendors or groups, and having that stuff at your fingertips and accessible, it has been fantastic, and it's helped me a lot, and it's helped my team a lot across a couple organizations now. So it's fantastic having all that information out there, and I would just encourage anyone that's in e-discovery or looking to get into e-discovery to take full advantage of that, and maybe ultimately seek certifications and those kinds of opportunities.
Excellent. Well, Chris, thanks for coming in, and thanks for the great drink, man. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.